Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. Once again, you've reached episode number 271, entitled How Do We Structure Our Clients' Websites? It was published on Thursday, the 24th of March, 2022. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and I'll be joined in just a few minutes by my good friend David Wormsley so that we can have our chat. Just so that you know, we do vary the content that we produce on WP Builds. We've got really two main types. We've got the podcast, which we are putting out every Thursday. That's actually what you're listening to now. But it, in turn, is divided up into two main types. We have interviews every 2 weeks. And then between those interviews, I have a chat with my friend David Wormsley, as I just mentioned. So next week, you'll find an interview, and that's usually to do with some kind of WordPress product, perhaps a theme or a service on offer in the WordPress space. So the content varies a little bit. And then every single Monday at 2 p.m. UK time, we have our This Week in WordPress show. It's a live show and we have 2 or 3 guests from the WordPress community, and you can come and make comments and hopefully get yourself involved in that show. That can be found at wpbuilds.com/live, and then we repurpose that and put it out as a podcast episode every Tuesday morning. Now, if any of that interests you, the way that you can keep updated is to go to wpbuilds.com/subscribe. That's wpbuilds.com/subscribe, and sign up to our newsletter, and we will keep you notified when that happens. Another page you might like to visit is wpbuilds.com/deals. It's a little bit like Black Friday, but every day of the week. WordPress products, themes, blocks, and all sorts of different things with significant coupon codes. Like I say, it's there all the time. wpbuilds.com/deals if you want to make use of that. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by Cloudways. Cloudways provides the ultimate managed WordPress and WooCommerce hosting solutions. Easy setup allows you to get started in minutes. Focus on your business and say goodbye to hassles. Get started with their free 3-day trial to enjoy unmatched performance, superb uptime, and 24/7 active support. You can find out more at cloudways.com. And we do thank Cloudways for helping us to keep the WP Builds podcast going. Okay, what are we talking about this week? Well, it's episode number 271, How Do We Structure Our Clients' Websites? We're going through this process of relearning everything from the start. We're calling it the WordPress Business Bootcamp. And today we're trying to figure out what is it that we actually need to have on a web page right at the beginning. This is a new client. Perhaps they've got limited budget. We need to think about what's going to be the most effective way to spend that budget. Do we need a certain arrangement of pages, a contact page, an About Us page? Do we need a landing page? Do we need email sign-up forms? What is it that we need? What kind of things are on offer? What does the industry that our client is in require? And so on and so forth. I hope that you enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to another in the Business Bootcamp series, where we relearn everything we know about building WordPress sites and running a web design business from start to finish. We're on season 2 and we're looking at the design process. And today we're going to be discussing how do we structure our clients' websites. So Nathan and I are taking different approaches to get our new business running and our first client site built. She's a lawyer with no previous site, and she's called Miss A. Nathan, shall we just quickly recap?
Yeah, for those of you that haven't been listening to previous episodes, I'm working on the more tried and trusted, decades-old principle of the waterfall, where everything is kind of done in advance. You discuss with the client what you want, you get a proposal out and a contract signed, and then discussions about how things may look and so on, and possibly a graphic designer, and then it's all taken, and then I just clear off and build the site and hand it over, and everybody's happy. That's my approach.
And I'm taking it the agile approach, where it assumes that no one's really happy with that approach, and it's all about kind of building. Well, it's about not setting the the actual design ahead of time and letting a process get us to what is needed.
Yeah,
so
you
it's
iterate
kind of a
through
different
it
approach.
with the client, and it's more of an organic developing strategy as opposed to top down.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, we covered that so much before, so we'll try and, in a way, this doesn't really so much come into this. It doesn't matter, I guess, which route you're going, although I guess what I'm talking about here particularly is favoring the kind of more agile approach. But structuring sites, we're talking about pages and how we put the content on the pages, and I think it's fair to say that we can only scratch the surface with this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a fairly lengthy discussion, as we always do before we hit record. We're often on the phone for an hour or more discussing what we're going to discuss. Do you know what? Sometimes, David, I think those discussions are better than the actual podcast that we put out.
Yeah.
But that's not really the point. And it did occur to me as we were having those conversations this morning that, the agile versus waterfall thing doesn't really matter quite so much as it has done in the past. But nevertheless, we're talking about what we put on the website, what the structure is like, and so on. So do you want to kick us off what the problem is?
Yeah. So I think we've got our lawyer, and we know that she's in a big city, and we probably would think initially that she just needs a simple brochure site, but we'll explore this a little bit. But so maybe we've got a few assumptions that it'd just be the standard brochure site with the home and about, services, contact page and that. But much has changed really, I think, in the industry. And we've become more data driven. We've become more, UX plays a bigger role, at least in higher level sites. So whether we want to be really introducing some of these kind of concepts. So things have changed over the time, and we've got a list of things that perhaps weren't around when you and I were starting with our first web designs. We've got, I'll start us off with the lead magnets and marketing funnels. That's a fairly newish kind of thing.
Yep.
In marketing. We've got a lot of retargeting going on. So we're probably setting up our website. So to exclude them from retargeting, we might need a thank you page. So we've got a little bit of a funnel even in our basic site, which we wouldn't have had. We've got more conversion focused landing pages. So we're now often assuming that we're going to be sending traffic to one particular page, which might be of interest. So in the case of our lawyer, perhaps there might be one particular service that she does. And you might want to, in some of your marketing, maybe Google Ads to just send people directly to that page and have everything that the visitor needs to know to be able to take a call to action is on that page. I think that's a definite change, don't you think?
Yeah, you're right. There's quite a few things that certainly when I started, the brochure site was literally it.
Yeah.
It may have been that as opposed to writing it in HTML, you would use some sort of templating structure, PHP template files and so on. But basically, you ended up with the exact same thing. It was a static website of 3 or 4 pages and a contact form was about as clever as it got, to be honest.
Yeah.
But now, as you described, since then, did you go through the list of 5? Did you get all 5?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
We got personalized content, which is an option for us. That's a new trend. And I guess we've got a general move towards content marketing as an online marketing approach.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and where the two models do diverge, my waterfall model kind of means that I either have to educate the client on this in advance and say, look, if you want these kind of things, and here's the reasons why you may want them, then we can add those in, but we'll have to figure that out before we start. Whereas your approach, you could completely leave that off the table, just get the basic structure built in, and then go back and sort of say, on a much more iterative level, okay, what about this? Or what about this? It's much more of an a la carte approach to it. Both can ultimately have them, but it's just a different case of doing it at the beginning. I feel that with our client, Miss A, by the way, we never did talk about kind of how old she is, and some of the things may be of interest later, especially around social media and where they spend their time and what they view as important online.
Yeah.
The age may have some sort of bearing on it. I feel that literally all of those things would be desirable to have, but depending upon Miss A's budget and where she's spent her time online, and whether she views it as a marketing tool or just something, to have online because it's nice to have a website. Some of those things may be a stretch too far, and there'd be a lot of explaining to be done about how all of them work. And there would be quite a hill, I think, to overcome. Certainly the lawyer clients that I've had in the past, very traditional, just wanted a brochure site. Contact form was important, but what they really wanted was the phone to ring. So the website really was a conduit to make the phone ring. And so all the other things, the lead magnets probably would have fallen by the wayside. Personalized content probably would have fallen by the wayside. But I can think of things like retargeting. Well, maybe that would be important because that really may help their conversions and get the phone to ring more. But there would definitely be a job of trying to sell them on all of this in advance. And so I would have to know and be on my A game what these things are and how they work. And I think when we were talking before, you mentioned a few times where you had felt that you didn't do justice to explaining them to clients, and so it didn't kind of work out.
Yeah, I think that, we've talked about these kind of things before. We said that, often not for our clients. And as I am literally, this series about relearning, but I am actually trying to kind of rebuild what I'm going to be doing for the future. I've come to a sort of conclusion, although this stuff is overwhelming actually to me to try and learn all this stuff, it's certainly overwhelming to get over to a client why they might want to do it. And, but I think going forward, we'll have to, because at the top level websites, all of this stuff's really important, and the whole thing of moving towards UX as being the thing, and the website itself only being the tip of that UX iceberg. I think eventually it's going to be the only way at some point of being able to distinguish ourselves in our offering from people who can now just knock up a site with a page builder and templates, and WordPress is becoming that itself. So in order to justify our existence as web designers, I think we have to get more into that kind of greater pool of UX stuff and start more at the beginning. But you're right, for most people, they're going to ask for a website, and you're going to deliver them a website, and they're going to be happy with that because that's what they asked for. They're going to turn up with me, and I'm going to talk about all of this stuff, and they're just going to go, can you give me Nathan's number, please?
Yeah, that's right. So a couple of things from that. The first thing is whether Miss A sees a lot of this as snake oil, in the same way that if you go into a shop and you just want to buy this one thing, and all of a sudden you feel like you're under pressure to buy the insurance that goes with it and the widget which attaches to it to do all these other things, you feel like, actually, no, I want a website. All of this stuff is just a way to siphon money out of me. That there may be that. I think that's totally plausible that the client could regard this as, well, this is nonsense, and it's stuff that I don't need to be concerned about. Of course, you and I, and probably everybody listening to this podcast, realizes there is value in all of this if it's done right. But I think the job of persuading Miss A in this case is going to be really difficult. And the other thing is time. The amount of time it takes to explain all of this. And I'm sure you've had the same experience. There are some clients who seem to have an endless amount of time to talk to you. It's almost like, do they actually work? They're quite willing to spend hours on the phone to me. And I'm almost finding it difficult to end the phone call or end the meeting. But I feel that there are some industries, and particularly lawyers, at least in the United Kingdom, they always seem to be incredibly busy. And getting Madame A, Miss A, to have the hours that it would take, it may be a step too far. Genuinely, it may be a step too far. Have you got another couple of hours where we could go through? Well, actually, no. I've got a whole bunch of meetings, and in the time that it will take you to explain it, I've lost £500 or whatever it might be. So I do think there's obstacles there.
I've put out a kind of structure which is not dissimilar from how our recent clients come with a local website, which could be similar to Miss A. So, let's assume the site, we assume it's going to be simple, and we haven't bombarded the client with all this stuff. It's local, so we'll probably tell her to set up Google My Business and maybe just consider making sure she boosts her position there by getting the link so she can invite people to give reviews. But then if we've done the thing that I'm always keen to do now, and even more so because I'm really into this kind of data-driven approach, do some basic keyword and competitive research. If we do that, we could discover something that we didn't expect, like there's searches for divorce lawyers is really high and the competition for it is quite low. And it's not a Google trend. It's not a result of people splitting up over COVID and being together. So, if the client loves this work, it could turn out that we start to structure the site based on some data that isn't expensive, and she didn't need to be involved in it. You went and looked and said, okay, look at the services you've got. It's interesting. You can compete for some of these. And look, your competitors, they don't even know about it. They're just putting it under this general kind of, services we have. There's really nothing optimized for it. That could lead them to see, because they're new, aren't they? They've got to compete with people with sites that have been online, for much longer time.
Yeah.
So,
are you suggesting that you might do a little bit of that, just a small amount, just to give you some beachhead from which to talk? You would do that perhaps without even consulting them about the fact that you were going to do it. You've got enough information. They're a lawyer. They live in this city. Let's find out what people are looking for when they're looking for lawyers in this city. And you begin that conversation with data in your back pocket already, as opposed to the conversation which I've always had. I've never done it that way around, which is we should do some keyword research so that we can figure out what people are searching for. I do like that, because if you've got the right tools and right experience, I imagine you could probably get a lot of that done in just a matter of minutes.
I think so. I mean, people don't book me for a few hours to do the keyword research. I've now, from something that I used to sort of say, I think we should do this, to now saying, why don't we just start this? Particularly with a new site, just say, your competitors have got years ahead, so it gives them an advantage on search. And assuming that search is, the key way to be going, and the website is, let's just spend this time here, because it will tell us, it might give us some real clues about where we should just focus and how we'll build the website. And I think if you put that over without them having to know anything, can justify it and say, look, here's a list, and you can see here that certain things are hard to rank for, and that your competitors haven't, really taken up this opportunity. I think we should maybe structure it that way and put a bit of an emphasis on divorce.
Yeah, I'm with you. So keyword research kind of stands alone. You had 5 points earlier. You had lead magnets and marketing funnels, retargeting, conversion-focused landing pages, personalized content, and content marketing. But SEO keyword research kind of is a different beast. Doing that seems like a no-brainer, almost like a default. You should do some of that. In terms of those 5, what would be the one that you would pick out for Miss A as the one that you might suggest, even if time were limited and budget was limited? I think I would probably go for retargeting, I think.
Interesting. I don't know, but I'm going to kind of answer that question, because I've put some points in about where this this design might go. So if we did get that, we've convinced her. So we're going to have a page now on divorce law. But this local site that was going to be the brochure site, what if she tells us next that, well, I divorce law is what I do. Actually, I do a lot of the work for that, online. They just need to send me stuff. I don't need to meet people. Suddenly her website stops being this local site.
Yeah.
It starts to become international, of which it could potentially then be worth competing for that. And of which then we just start to think, well, maybe we need to put some content up. Is there, can you write on something like this, and we can put this in blogs?
Do you know, that is the moment where you potentially change that person's life, because they probably have only the I say probably, I have no idea, but let's imagine in the case of Miss A, there's probably an expectation that the business world for her is bound by geography, where clients can get to her from a reasonable distance, so it's going to be people within, let's say, 25 miles, and depending on where she lives, that might be a huge pool, it might not be. But if you can suddenly open up the whole of the UK, and I'm guessing in the case of a lawyer in the UK, that's probably the boundaries, because the law changes as soon as you step outside of the jurisdiction of the United Kingdom. But you've made the whole of the United Kingdom available as possible clients, and that's utterly revolutionary. So that conversation, you're almost compelled to have it, aren't you, really? And your knowledge has just transformed the scope of what she could do.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more of that, and people have learned certainly over this COVID period to do more online work with perhaps what were just their local customers. But suddenly, when you realise you wanted to find your presence is going online and you're creating something, well, why not just start it off with that in mind? You'll get your business from anywhere if you can do it from anywhere.
Yeah, and I guess Lawyers is a perfect example. If you're a takeaway restaurant or something, then the boundaries of the geography are always going to be a problem. But in this case, that feels like a really revolutionary conversation to have. I feel I've had those similar conversations before, and certainly in my case, they've always turned out to be fruitless. The limits of that person's comfort has always overridden their desire to sort of go global. It's like, look, can we just start with this basic thing, please, and we'll see how we go. I'm busy enough already, kind of mentality, So it may be a conversation to have, but it may not turn out in the sort of the fanfare that we've just described.
No, and I've not got this right. I mean, a couple of last clients have been quite interesting because I've kind of put these concepts to them, and I think they're quite ambitious in what they want to do, and they're okay there. They like the idea, even if they won't find the time, but they might find the money for you to go and try and put some of these articles together, particularly if you know which keywords you're going for. So I found that where previously I've completely failed to get over what I'm trying to do with them with this marketing, and it's complete. I'm okay when I'm talking to them, they understand, but a lot of this online stuff, this, if you like, reverse of traditional marketing that we get with online is just too difficult for people who are just busy in their work to get. As soon as you've stopped talking, there's a whole century of mass media marketing, which is going to overtake anything you might have said.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even going back decades, which in internet terms is a really long time. Let's go back 10 years. I remember reading posts even in things like .NET magazine, where people were describing that moment where a complete stranger had bought something of theirs offline with no knowledge of who they were and no real insight, apart from the marketing jargon, of what was contained in their course, for example. And that sudden realization that, oh, wow, this could be huge. And I think it would be really difficult to get Miss A over that barrier, but I think if you could somehow track one conversion that they had no business getting in terms of the geography and their expectations from that geography, then the gates would flood open, I'm sure, because suddenly you realize, boy, the UK, wow, okay, or America, or wherever you happen to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think, with anything like this, particularly if you're like us, usually local customers, using not, smallish budgets, it's hard to move somebody. But I think that a simple bit of quick keyword research, if they buy into it, could lead it, and it could lead how you structure your pages and decide whether you might at least have attempt to have a blog in. So some of your page structures sorted. Should we move on to some of the kind of more
the nuts and the bolts of what goes on the page?
Yeah, exactly. So, navigation, that's probably changed over the years. It's probably that still remains the most important thing of a site. If they can't navigate their way around it, then it's a bit of a fail. So we've got our lawyer. So what format do you think we should be doing for our kind of navigation?
Well, it was interesting because in our conversation before, we both had a sort of fairly standard template for this. And that was essentially logo left, navigation right, probably very conservative, minimal range of crazy stuff happening on the page, but basically that, you've got the logo, which is a link back to the home page, and then a contact us page and about us, and it's all linked in a menu. And on mobile, just the typical, sort of drop down hamburger icon or a off canvas menu which sweeps in, just something really predictable, nothing weird, totally ordinary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because again, if we're data, the Nielsen Norman Group do a lot on this kind of thing, navigation, and what works. And, you go with the conventions, don't you, where you can. unless you need to be a bit wacky because that's your brand, it demands that you do it. So you would go, wouldn't you? Logo left. And we were saying the same thing. We got it wrong though, didn't we? We said we went to Starbucks to see. We was expecting a big center logo because they're kind of fancy and trendy, but we were wrong.
No, it was logo far to the left and a small logo at that, to be honest. I was quite surprised. But you're right. I mean, basically you're erring on the side of caution here, aren't you? Everything's predictable, normal. I'm imagining we're choosing some sort of really bland serif style font just because it speaks of antiquity and trustworthiness and all of those kind of things. But nothing weird. Minimal amount of pages on this brochure site. Everything clearly labeled, nice high contrast, easy to use navigation. Nothing weird.
Well, probably. Now, one of the things we were talking about landing pages and stuff. I mean, I guess if I've managed to convince her to go this divorce thing, so she's got her own dedicated page, even if it's not in the top menu and it's just in her services for divorce. The next question I'm going to ask me for conversion, particularly as she's new, and we might think about taking some Google ads out. And if we can make our page that we send it to more relevant, then we save on the budget, the cost per click. Would we be then thinking about structuring the pages for our services more like landing pages? So when a visitor comes, there is everything they need to know about that services to make a call to action, so they know potentially the price if that's up there. Or is that how we might go about it? Because we wouldn't do, would we, on our traditional sites? We'd be happy for people to click around and find the about us, find the price separate.
I know what you mean. The whole landing page thing always feels to me like a scarcity driven promotional style thing where at all costs you want people to stay on that page and therefore click through. And I don't know, my gut is telling me, which based upon no data at all, that feels like the wrong approach. But I could be completely wrong. If the data shows something different and we can prove that lawyers with their highly converting pages have for divorce or for conveyancing or whatever it might be, if that works, yes. But I don't know, it just feels to me as if that would be the wrong approach. The high pressure stuff feels like it ought to be a bit off the table, but I'm pretty sure that that's me and my proclivities there. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think there's an argument. It's because there's still a big argument out there, which you can kind of misbuff with. Sorry, excuse me. You can myth bust. Really, this one that people look the above the fold stuff is the most important thing, because of course the above the fold is very difficult with all the different devices, but also that even I think they've done research, haven't they, that users will say they don't like to scroll, but in actual fact what users say about what they want is not true about how they behave. And it's how they're led on to scroll which makes the difference. So users hate to scroll if they're filling in a form and the submit button is just off the screen, that's an annoyance,
Yeah.
But if they're led through a story on them. So I know what you're saying about landing pages, but I'm very keen on them. I'm very keen on the idea that you could potentially structure your pages so you could advertise them independently, the services separate to the main site, and have it work.
I know what you mean. I think in the back of my head is when you started talking about a page for divorce, I'm thinking at that point, and again, I think this is my personal proclivity, I'd want this to be the least stressful environment possible. And the idea of the endorphins being squeezed with some sort of scarcity or, click here now to receive great advice about divorce. It feels a bit the antithesis of what I would like to see. But again, in the data-driven model, if that's working, it's interesting. You get into the whole concept of, the dark patterns that you could put into play here and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know. My feeling is I would go in the opposite direction to you on that.
Yeah, and my feeling is that I know exactly what you're saying, and I think that's tradition of landing pages, and the big conversion experts are interested in that side. But I don't think your content has to be like that.
No,
why not just if you can put a little about, a little
correct
pricing, a little contact in the same form, it's just convenient. Assuming you believe that your people are going to scroll. Of course, you could test this out, couldn't you, to see if people do actually scroll to the end. But in my experience, though, so far with just the few sites that I've been able to look a little bit at. When I've gone for a more landing page approach, we talked about that trailer site, you know what I'm talking about. That's got quite a long landing page as a home page. But absolutely, that is where they're not going to the contact page to fill in their details. They are going to the contact that's at the bottom of that page, and they have to scroll through a lot to get to it. And it's not self-contained. I wouldn't say it's a landing page quite in that way, but so it has led me a little bit more towards that approach, rather than, particularly with mobiles in mind. So the contact page, I think, is now difficult because more people are on their mobiles, and if you have to load another page, then there's some time and you might lose people before they get to that main call to action. Whereas if the contact is always maybe a pop-up or at the bottom of that particular page, it's loading in the background while they're getting ready to scroll their content. So I think, there's question mark over whether the traditional, contact page needs to be there quite as much.
Yeah, I guess we should also mention the fact that obviously we're talking about a lawyer here, so the whole landing page thing is really kind of interesting. It's thrown into doubt by the industry, which is a good thing to notice. Obviously, if you were selling cheap plastic widgets, that might be like, hit them hard, really go for the landing pages like crazy. Yeah. But I think you're right about the contact page. I think having on a lawyer's website, having clear. Okay, so first of all, I imagine that the purpose of this website in many respects is to get the phone to ring. So having the telephone number really visible, but also as a secondary piece, having that contact form available on all different parts of the website everywhere ubiquitously, that would be a complete no-brainer. So it might be a sidebar, or as you said, some sort of modal pop-up which comes already loaded, ready to go as soon as you click contact us or interested in talking more, whatever it might be. I think that's a really good idea. I was saying to you earlier, I saw a really nice example, and I can't think what it was the other day, where I clicked on a contact us button. I was on my mobile phone and a modal popped up which consumed 98% of the screen. It was only the fact that there was a tiny border around the edge which was grayed out, which made me think, I haven't changed pages. And it was just brilliant. It was a click here to call us, so it was a phone number button, and then directly underneath that was the contact page. And it had everything right there, and I didn't have to think. And I did. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I ended up clicking and phoning, and it was seamless and perfect.
I think the phone, I don't know, did we discuss this last time? I'm not sure, but it's a conversation with Miss A, because I think a lot of clients will just say they want the phone to ring, but a lot of them haven't even given it a thought to when their potential leads might be online, and the telephone isn't then so important. And there is some advantage to the one call to action button that says contact us, and it leads you to the options for the phone, but has prominently the email, because if you've lost somebody, they don't leave a message, then you've lost them for good. If you've got their email, you've got contact back. So, and also there are the other things which we might get onto, which I mentioned earlier, was the fact that another page that we probably always want these days is the thank you page, because it is part of a small funnel in the site, where I would have never thought that in the early sites I did. But now you need it, don't you? The thank you page. Once somebody submitted a form, you need the thank you page. If you decide to do the retargeting, you need to be able to find a way to exclude them from getting the marketing.
Yep.
And also, usually that thank you page, you might want them to do something else, perhaps join your, so you need to give them something else that they might be able to do next before you get to them.
So, yeah, I take your point. I mean, it may not be that the phone is required to ring. It may be that you want them to fill out a form, but having those options just needs a bit of careful thought, doesn't it? Which is the one which is working, which is the one that you need to be working because you're actually asleep and there's nobody manning the phone, or you're just not going to be manning the phone anyway because it's only you. And I imagine in the case of this lawyer, she's probably not going to be that available on the phone. So the contact form might take precedence, and that conversation would need to be had. Are you actually going to answer the phone? Because if somebody rings and you don't pick it up, you've probably lost them forever, as opposed to a contact form where they're probably expecting a 24-hour turnaround, and you can deal with all of that when you've got a bit of downtime.
Do you know what I quite like? I like people filling in the forms because in my lazy way, I can very easily see whether the site's getting leads. But of course, if you're doing proper kind of Google Analytics with this stuff. You're going to mark up that phone number. So if someone clicks it through the web, you're going to see that an action's been taken.
Yeah.
So you can measure it, can't you, as a call to action? But I've got a real inkling to go to forms all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it works 24/7, doesn't it? And maybe the personalization thing that we mentioned earlier is one of those 5 points right at the top. It may be that, with WordPress plugins, Logic Hop and If So and all of that kind of stuff, you could just swap out. The phone number just disappears after 5 p.m. on a Friday and doesn't come back again until 9 a.m. on a Monday. So there's options there to personalize it. In fact, I would totally recommend doing something like that based upon the needs.
We got there was a few other sort of questions here, things that I think have changed, as we're relearning. So it used to. I was watching some courses actually, which were dating back to, but one of them was 2016.
Oh, the Middle Ages.
Yeah, I know. It's not long ago, but there was some going further back. But this one particularly stood out because what I was noticing on a good design that they were showing was that there was links on the header there to their social networks. And that used to be really popular, didn't it, in your header space? Yeah. Not so much now. And do you think that's research has come on even in that kind of few years, really, so much so that because I think it has with blog posts as well, where we structure it there. I think they've moved out because we don't really want to distract and send people to the social networks. We want them to do the thing they came to the site for, and our call to action.
I guess it really depends upon who you are and what your company is. So I don't know, if I'm a company that's selling surf gear and skateboards and things like that, it may be that I'm going to drive so much traffic through my YouTube channel with the videos that I put together, waxing down my surfboards and all of that, that sort of content that I can create over there and the conversations that can happen. But I feel that for the lawyer, what possible thing can she do on social media which is going to truly help her website? Now, obviously, there are exceptions, but you'd be pretty extraordinary to make that happen. So I think in this particular case, I would advise against it. I mean, maybe they're dead set on it and they're going to commit to tons of work on social media, but it feels in this case like folly. But it was just the thing, wasn't it? It was there was no reason not to do it. We had no idea what social media was. But if you get somebody on your website and you take them to Twitter, well, goodbye. They're going to get lost in some nonsense that's got nothing to do with what you want them to do, the conversion. But I'm sure that Twitter will gladly have them and probably figure out that they've come from a lawyer's website, so show them a bunch of lawyers' adverts.
Yeah, exactly, to the competitor. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of this happens, and I'm guilty of it along with everybody else. But kind of the data-driven approach where you just think, the template that everybody seems to have used seems wrong for the configuration for what people are searching for. And I think this is another example of templates which you might find on Template Monster or Theme Forest or something. They look beautiful, they're designed by somebody, but they're sticking in content. So you look at it and you think, that's a good place. Or you've bought it and it's already got a convenience, so you carry on with it. But when you think about it, even if you are the type of marketing that you might get your leads through the social media, just having it up there with a symbol tells you nothing about what you're going to get if you click on it.
And do remember that the entire purpose of social media is to keep them on the social media. It is not to help you. It is not to promote your business. I mean, obviously, if you're prepared to spend on ads to drive them back from Facebook to your website, then that's different. But you have lost them the second they stray onto social media. Caveats, obviously, not always the case. But increasingly, with the noise going on, it just seems like a fruitless thing to do. But everything was going social. Almost to the point where websites were not needed anymore. You can have a Facebook page, it's fine. But now, of course, we've come full circle and people are seemingly in small trickles getting themselves away from social media more and more. So I would say don't put the social links in the header.
But it's still very popular, isn't it? I think to have Interestingly, I think the same is true with stuff that's now become popular. There's a very popular plugin come out where it will actually put your testimonials from your social, but I think they could potentially connect you to where the source is and send you back to them. So I always wonder whether they're a good thing as well. But people do put their Twitter feeds in their sites or their Instagram feeds.
Yeah, I guess there is a purpose to it, but my primary argument would be, look, the endeavor here is to get traffic to your website, and anything which is consuming people's time in the opposite direction is probably not something we want to do at the outset. No. Sure enough, if you've got a YouTube following of 20 million people, or something probably slightly less is acceptable as well, maybe there's probably benefit in that. But in the case of a lawyer, perhaps not.
No. There was an interesting thing, actually. I just remembered it I said about pop-up forms or having the forms on the kind of landing page, but I think some research that was done on the effectiveness of that pop-up form. So there's a theory behind it. In lizard brain, you click on a button because it's nice and shiny, and it pops up with the form. So you've half committed, so you fill in the form. Whereas if you see the form, it looks like hard work and you skip it. So it increases. But apparently, research done later on that showed that with certain occupations that didn't work, lawyers were one of those, or governments. It's too catchy, if you like, to have the kind of pop-ups. They would expect to see a form because they're kind of established institutions. So it's interesting how it goes into reverse.
Do you use any of the built-in browser functionality to pre-fill forms?
Yeah.
You see, I don't. Every single form that I go to, I have to manually fill in. The only exception to that is login details with LastPass. So they get pre-populated if I click the button.
Yeah.
But I don't have it, hit name, surname, fill that out, please. Address, fill that out. Credit card, fill that out, blah, blah, blah. I just wondered, because obviously if you've enabled that feature, the forms are just potentially already filled out on the page already, and all you need to do is click submit if there's no message field required.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, in my case, it's a bit of an inconvenience. Often it's usually filling it in with the details I don't want, and so it seems to make more work for me. But yeah, you're right.
Did you ever accidentally on purpose get email from a form that had consumed your email address, even if you hadn't clicked submit?
Oh no! Have you had that happen?
No, because I don't have them pre-filled. I have to make the mental effort to do it. But I went to a website the other day to buy something, and I didn't commit. I just filled out my email address, and then I got distracted. Had every intention, but I clicked no buttons, and about an hour later, I got there's something in your cart message.
Wow.
So that had definitely happened in that case, and I it didn't really bother me because I'm not going to go back and buy it, or maybe I am. But the point is, I'm aware of the decision that needs to be made there. But I did think I didn't commit to anything there, did I? I simply typed it in. So anyway, just a totally tangential conversation.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting, particularly as we're keeping our lawyer in mind. We can't do any kind of dodgy stuff or any quirky stuff with that. No. So we, same as landing pages, why you felt that was wrong. I was keen on the idea that you could have one page, but anything salesy, because you've got to establish that these are professionals, haven't you? And anything that kind of salesy.
Yeah, and ultimately somebody that can be trusted with possibly your deepest, darkest secrets. Yeah, and, the idea of seeming a bit like a, forgive me, second-hand car salesman is just totally verboten. So anyway, there's social links dealt with. Where are we going next?
Blogs used to go as well. If I convinced her to do a blog, I used to put that in the main header. Now they seem to have gone in the footer, because I think most people have realised that people who read blogs have come in through search, and it's just one more distraction away from what the actual visitors you want.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're starting out, a blog which is piecemeal, half done with content from ages ago just looks worse. But if you've arranged it so that the dates don't appear, that's fine. But I don't feel that stuff belongs at the top of the website unless you are a total authority and that blog is your thing. It's clear that that's an important part of the business. In our case, if Miss A does write some blog posts, which I think is a really valuable thing to do, then yes, maybe start to feature it a bit more, but at the beginning, no, bury it. Rely on Google.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've thought about it in the same way that we might now try and think, instead of trying to put your apps from your social media into your site and send them to them, I think you think of the blog in the same way. It's really there to generate you traffic to bring them to your site. So it can be hidden. And on the actual blog posts themselves, there's some link back to relevant content that sells your services.
Yeah.
So I think it's those kind of things didn't, we would have just stuck it in the header, wouldn't we, in the early days? And I think all of this data has kind of changed the way that we look at things.
Yep.
And that's changed our structure.
But also you've got a real opportunity right at the beginning when we talked about SEO. There's a real opportunity there to marry the two things together. Okay, here's your blog. We can totally prove that if you blog and you are thoughtful about it and you know what your keywords are, it will have an impact. Now, it might not be immediate and it might not be instant or very, very profitable, but it will make a difference. So I think a blog for Miss A would be really, really useful.
Yeah. Do you know, one other thing we could just quickly talk about, I didn't put this properly down in the notes, but on the 2016 course that I was looking at, they were really going through the design process of something, and they decided to put some of the content, I think thinking above the fold, they put it in a slider. And we'll have this debate forever. This could be a whole episode, but it's interesting about tabbed contents and sliders, thinking of SEO. Do we, as I'm doing on a recent site, I've suddenly decided it needed more, probably just for Google, but also for the visitor who might need more information on the same page, putting it in tabbed content. Have you any thoughts on this?
I do, actually, and they're largely encapsulated by the word accessibility, especially in terms of a lawyer. You feel like the lawyer has the accessibility component of this website, perhaps more than in other cases. Obviously, the law says otherwise, but the industry is what it is. The lawyer will need to be totally accessible. That's the law, right? You've got to do certain things.
Right.
And I feel you'd have to make sure that was done really effectively. So whether it was a slider or whether it was a, I don't know, tabs or whatever, they need to be, with the keyboard, you need to be able to tab to the right content and make your way through it effectively and so on and so forth. My feeling is, I don't know, I feel that those days are gone a bit. Feels like the whole slider thing, it's not something I would be pushing much anymore.
Yeah, I can't imagine a situation where the lawyer would need a slider on that. I think sometimes it can be really effective, and most of the research that says sliders are bad are pretty much from 2014 or something, where they were pretty much just junk, not really helping a visitor to learn anything more about the site. I think they're much more interactive and can be clever now, but I think you're right, the accessibility there. Tabs are fine, aren't they? Because, I mean, Beaver Builder, I've noticed that it's made itself very accessible with any of their tab content. So now you're not supposed to remove the outline, are you? So it looks pretty ugly. People are saying, how do I get rid of this ugly outline? But it's actually you're not supposed to remove it. And I think that content's fine, but sliders, I can't imagine. She could have tabbed content that gave more information. Because I think when we're looking at a page, aren't we, most of the time, we're trying to make it easily understandable for the skim reader who's short on attention. And maybe we not need to worry so much with a lawyer, but there's still got to be an element of that. And then we need to still have something for everybody who likes every bit of detail.
I think, honestly, that nowadays everybody is now programmed with the up-down mentality, like the finger. Yeah. It's just swipe up, swipe down. Not left and right, it's just up and down. And so anything which kind of interrupts that process is probably not ideal. And of course, it's using up more space horizontally, but it's still using up the same space. At least they get to see it right away, as opposed to a tab or a slider where it might be hidden for a portion of time.
I think, that's what's really, and we can only do our best guesses. I mean, I love this conversation because it's, when you're thinking about how you might like, because there's pros and cons, isn't there?
Yeah,
For anything you might do, and trying to work out which is going to be the best. But, in an ideal world, Miss A will just say, yeah, I've got a big budget. Why don't you just go and test all this stuff? Let's try it out.
Yay. I love Miss A. She's great. She's got loads of money and wants us to just try everything. Oh.
Yeah.
How are we doing? Are we nearly there?
I think we've probably covered everything. We didn't do it in any order that we intended. No. But I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
As I say, we're scratching the surface with this topic. We could go on forever.
But there's so much to talk about in terms of what you're going to lay out on the page. And, I think the key bits for me were the bits at the beginning. What do you offer as the different services? And you kind of work from there. In your model, you can just iterate through all of that and keep coming back. I do think the bit that you mentioned about doing a sneaky bit of keyword research before the meeting, I think that's gold. I would have definitely benefited from that. But let us know what you think in the comments or on the Facebook group. There we are, driving traffic away from the website.
Next time we're going to be talking about copy.
Okay,
that'll be fun.
Coffee? Yeah. How delightful.
Coffee.
Oh.
No, copy.
Oh dear, I was going to say conversation about coffee sounds ideal. All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, no. Cheers.
Okay, I hope that you enjoyed that episode. As always, very nice to chat to my friend David Wormsley about these things. Perhaps something in there triggered you in some way. Perhaps you disagree with us or strongly agree. You can make comments on the WP Builds website. Go there and search for episode number 271 and make a comment. Alternatively, go to wpbuilds.com/Facebook. That's our Facebook group, and you could make a comment there. Or we're on Twitter at WP Builds. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by Cloudways. Cloudways provides the ultimate managed WordPress and WooCommerce hosting solutions. Easy setup allows you to get started in minutes. Focus on your business and say goodbye to hassles. Get started with their free 3-day trial to enjoy unmatched performance, superb uptime, and 24/7 active support. You can find out more at cloudways.com. And we do thank Cloudways for helping us keep the WP Builds podcast going. Okay, that's all we've got for this week. I hope that you feel like you want to join us next week. Next week, as I said, it'll be an interview. And don't forget, we've got our This Week in WordPress show every single Monday, 2 p.m. UK time, wpbuilds.com/live. Come and join in the comments. Okay, here it comes. The typical cheesy music which we fade in at the end of each episode. I hope you have a safe week. Bye-bye for now.